Okay, let's see if we can wrap up this report. I'm being very brief, so you have to go back and read the report if you want more details. We talked about the risks and how some countries have, much more vulnerability to droughts than others. But now you know that something that happens in the Philippines cascades through the entire global economy, and examples are also uh, shown with impact of typhoons hitting Philippines and how that affects coconut products supplied through the system and how it actually affects GDPs, in fact, across the world and so on. So nobody is really isolated now. If one country is vulnerable, many can be vulnerable. For example, even with just the El Nino prediction, India started to reduce its exports of wheat and rice. Then rice price went up in Indonesia and so on and so forth. So drought impacts on ecosystems. Of course, percentage of plants affected by drought has more than doubled in the last 40 years. Ecosystems progressively turn into carbon sources. Amazon is a good example. 1/3 of global carbon dioxide emissions are offset by carbon uptake of terrestrial ecosystems, yet their capacity to sequester carbon is highly sensitive to drought events. So you have to be, you are increasing greenhouse gases, making climate warmer, global warming is happening, then forests are paying a price and they're releasing more CO2 because they cannot keep it in, and you are going to accelerate global warming, right? The rapid increase in surface temperatures correlate with the declining biodiversity. 14% of all wetlands critical for migratory species, as listed by Ramsar Convention, are located in drought-prone regions. That's not good news. The mega drought in Australia contributed to mega fires in 2019 and 2020 and released a lot of greenhouse gases, lots of habitat loss, the most dramatic habitat loss in post-colonial history, with about 3 billion animals estimated to have been killed or displaced. Canadian wildfires last year released more greenhouse gases than many countries put together. Drought-induced peatland fires in Indonesia, photosynthesis in European ecosystems. North American scientists confirm that drought reduces vegetation and bird abundance, vegetation richness and diversity of arthropods in semi-arid shortgrass prairie. 84% of all terrestrial ecosystems are threatened. During the first 2 decades of the 21st century, Amazon experienced 3 widespread droughts. We don't know how the extensive deforestation also adds to the misery here. During one of the severest droughts in Costa Rica in 2015, species-specific mortality reached up to 34%. Drought has reduced the ecosystem productivity of the Tibetan grasslands and so on. So predictable futures, we are at crossroads. Climate change is expected to increase the risk of droughts. World Bank estimates that up to 216 million people could be forced to migrate by 2050 because of drought, largely. Within the next few decades, 129 countries will experience an increase in drought exposure. If global warming reaches 3 degrees Celsius by 2100, as has been predicted, drought losses could be 5 times higher than they are today. And largest of those will, of course, come in Mediterranean Atlantic regions of Europe. In Angola, more than 40% of livestock, a significant livelihood source accounting for 31.4% of the agricultural GDP, is currently exposed to droughts, and this is expected to get worse. In EU and UK, annual losses from drought are currently estimated to be around 9 billion euros, and of course expected to rise by 2050. Between 4.8 and 5.7 billion people will live in areas that are water scarce for at least 1 month each year, up from 3.6 billion. So 4.8 and 5.7 billion people in water scarce regions for at least 1 month of the year. This is up from 3.6 here. How can we plan for the future? Launched in 2020, the conservation program of Revert revert in Brazil. I don't know, it says reverte maybe in Portuguese. It aims to regenerate 1 million hectares of degraded pastures by 2025. So you can see what progress they have made by now. I am recording this in middle of September 2024. Australian government has invested 65.4 billion US dollars in drought community support initiative under the current water resource management plan and drought plans in the UK. Water companies are required to anticipate a minimum 25-year planning period. Okay, and so on, aiming to improve productivity of agro and silvopastoral systems. The 3N initiative of Nigerians that we talked about. Integrated resource planning in Southern California. Afro 100 initiative brings together 31 African governments and other partners to restore 100 million hectares of land by 2030 to promote food security and become climate resilient and so on. So we have the capacity to create a remarkably different economy, one that can restore ecosystems and protect the environment while bringing forth innovation, prosperity, meaningful work, and true security. This is from Paul Hawken, who's the writer of Project Drawdown, and I have a complete list, a collection of podcasts based on podcasts on Drawdown, and I keep adding more findings, new findings there as well under new attractions, coming attractions. Okay, the need for proactive interventions. Billions of dollars have been committed, but to international climate finance, but it has a lot of issues in terms of where it's going, who qualifies. An overall drought vulnerability map based on total of 14 drought influencing criteria revealed that approximately 79% of Australia's southern Queensland region is moderately to extremely vulnerable to drought. Full incorporation of proactive drought interventions in Central Asia could save $4.5 billion in losses every year. Pago por Servicios Ambientales PSA, the Costa Rican program, has helped protect 320,000 hectares. In the short span of 2 years, King's Subbasin groundwater sustainability agendas in California's Central Valley have invested in hundreds of hectares of prime groundwater recharge land, information technology and indigenous knowledge with intelligence. ITIKI is as a drought early warning system that integrates indigenous knowledge and drought forecasting to help small-scale farmers make more informed decisions, for example, on when and how to plant which crops. The support forecast models provide accuracy of 70% to 98% for lead times of up to 4 years, as shown by trials in Mozambique, Kenya, and South Africa. You definitely want to look up this report by Masinda from 2020. Such lead times are amazing. Such high skills are just astonishing. Okay. There are many successful business cases coming from various parts of the world. So we are talking about Vietnam, Cambodia, Philippines, Indonesia, and so on, and Kazakhstan. Improve drinking water supply security in China, capital Beijing. A holistic restoration program was rolled out in the adjacent Myun Reservoir watershed. But China has also done river linking, which is argued to have moved, is moving water from water deficit regions to water surplus regions. So you have to be careful. With the highest water efficiency rate in agriculture, reaching a 70 to 80% rate, drip irrigation has helped to solve problems of water security in Israel. Israel does a lot of desalination as well, has a nice long coast to the Mediterranean. With the highest water efficiency, that's what I just said. South African Treasury invested over $13 million in drought relief intervention project and so on. What are the restoration interventions and monetary returns? These are the ranges due to different levels of degradation, labor costs, and market value fluctuations / erosion control estimates, which do not include coastal areas. So natural forest regeneration, you can see the monetary returns. Extended rotation forestry, and again various numbers in US dollars per hectare or per hectare per year. And agroforestry, my favorite, always incredibly useful. Regenerative agriculture, grassland regeneration, energy farming, erosion control. Okay, I have these items also appear in drawdown, so you can also go there and look at CO2 sequestration potential and return on investments by 2050 and so on. So landscape restoration has soil organic matter as a key factor here to focus on. Soil coverage with mosses, up to 1.4 billion US dollars in production value can be generated globally by adopting sustainable land and water management practices. Approximately 4 million hectares of degraded land within strict intervention zones have been rehabilitated in African Union. Farmer-led land restoration innovations are key pathways to addressing severe land degradation. 7 million hectares of land in the Sahel has come under increased vegetation cover over the last 25 years. In northern Shaanxi province, China, bare lands decreased from 5,896 square kilometers to just 1988 to 5,896 square kilometers in 1988 to 4,477 square kilometers due to active ecosystem restoration interventions and so on. Here is integrated landscape restoration and multiple returns. First, national land title reconciliation in Canada, wetland reclamation in Everglades, Florida, community forest rehabilitation in Peru, restoration of Kumasi in Ghana, river course restoration in Germany, and so on and so forth. Okay, so in India here, for example, community land restoration in Gujarat. So I won't read this table, but you see here countries, returns in terms of drought resilience, climate regulation, biodiversity increases, cultural value, employment, and actual monetary returns. Obviously, these are very useful, and they include rich countries from the global north like Australia and United States to poor countries like Ghana, developing countries like China and India, and so on and so forth. Some sobering message here: there is no radar image for a water crisis, no storm surges, no debris fields. The tap out is as silent as cancer. There's nothing to see, and so the news is treating the news is treating it like a sidebar. This is from Schusterman Jared, whoever that is. You can follow up, but you can see water tanks dry as a bone here, with a couple of kids just sitting and not knowing what their future may look like. Okay, so again, I just ran through the report. You need to go back and read some nice details. There's some very nice case studies, successful business examples, and so on. So let me leave it here, and we'll move to a new topic next, and that will be on economic growth versus development. Maybe I keep changing my mind. Okay, anyway, see you next time.